So various people eat unsuitable flat cakes. They're not wealthy enough to be able to choose what sort of flat cake. If you are going to have a flat cake, this is how you cook it, and this is what you have it with. That is very close to a recipe book. If you then would kindly look at item 5, I'm keeping a very close eye on the time here. This is one of the passages where Galen talks about cooks. So he's using recipes and cooking processes all the time in his nutrition. Foods have to be modified in order to be nutritious. And even though pleasure is a very dangerous and deceptive thing, as Plato told Galen and tells us, pleasure is still important in nutrition. So he's talking here about a plant called Cretan Alexanders, which are Smyrnia in Greek. This is item 5, one might perhaps think that in the first place it's not right to reckon it among foods, because it's not very nourishing. It has other qualities, just as it's also not right in the case of Alexanders, water parsnips and celery. For all such food flavourings, they are food flavourings, just like onions, garlic, leeks, wild leeks, and all bitter vegetables. In this class also a number of herbs, regarding which there's been discussion in the compilations on cookery. These are these same cookery books, which in a way are common to both physicians and cooks, but have a specific aim and purpose. For we physicians aim at benefits from food, not at pleasure. But since the unpleasantness of some foods contributes largely to poor concoction, poor digestion, in this regard it's better that they are moderately tasty. But for cooks, tastiness for the most part makes use of harmful seasonings so that poor rather than good concoction accompanies them. So foods must taste nice. And of course that is back with Henry Oakley's point about poisons taste nasty in order to keep us away from them. So Galen would say, I'm using the same processes as cookery books, but cooks have no sense of balance and no sense of restraint. So balance is needed at all times. If you must have a pancake, you should eat honey and salt with it. So Archistratus, as an example of a cook, Galen, as an example of the doctor, are operating on the same spectrum, but at opposite ends of it. Archistratus emphasises pleasure and fish, and almost nothing else. Fish offer endless variety for him. Galen doesn't want to pursue the endless variety of fish. Instead of having about 500 fish, he has about 20. Galen exhaustively covers vegetables, cereals and pulses. Archistratus dismisses vegetables altogether. They're not worthy of mention. Vegetables, of course, are essential for Galen, and in a number of specialist treatises, garlic, for example, is at the head of the list for thinning humours. Galen's also concerned with how juices and humours in plants transfer themselves into the human body. Archistratus is not in the least bit interested in that and doesn't use the words for humours or juices at all. So Galen is using cooking techniques which he inherited from Hippocrates. This is a coherent cultural system that he's operating in. He says we don't eat or read things like Egyptians read. We don't treat our babies like German people do. We are specifically Greek, operating in this system. We have foods which grow around us in the right places and the right season. We have infinite variety in this vast Roman Empire that we live in. We have inherited all these concepts and detailed models for how we stay healthy, and we have these separate categories of cookery books and medical books, but if we look at them in detail, they are surprisingly similar. So provided you navigate in the right way and have the right sort of pleasure, introduce some balance and have some restraint against bodily desires, you can read, as a doctor, you can read a cookery book with impunity. But the important thing is that these books that I've been talking about are written. This is a very, very literate society. The fragments of cookery books are stored in big libraries in major cities. And we have Greek cookery books where we don't have, as far as I know, German cookery books or Scythian cookery books, because the Greeks have writing and those other peoples don't. Obviously they did cooking, they had certain ways of processing food, but we have all this Greek information because of literature. And that rather takes us to the point that Jack Goody made in his book in 1982, that there are certain conditions needed to create cookery books. You need, sorry, I'll just make sure I know what conditions are. You need an agricultural surplus. You need a certain level of refinement, which is normally to be found in courtly circles. So there's a group of wealthy people who can choose what they're eating. And of course you need writing. So these are two authors who make the most extraordinary use of writing and operate in the same world and offer us a strange mixture of the same but very different approaches to what we eat. So there is indeed a great blurring of categories between food and drugs in ancient thought. Thank you for listening.